When I was 17 years old, which is longer ago than you think, I was newly elected as the social action vice president to our Reformed Jewish Youth Movement, NIFTY, to our Missouri Valley region where I lived. And as part of our leadership training, we had the opportunity, all of the social action vice presidents from across North America, the opportunity to go to the Religious Action Center of Reformed Judaism, our movement's social justice arm in Washington, D.C. This was very exciting as a 17-year-old from Kansas City who had never been to Washington, D.C. before. So after we arrived, the dozen or so of us teenagers were welcomed into this building that we knew absolutely nothing about, sitting around this table that, lo and behold, are we to find out, where the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act had been drafted. This was a holy place. We were then handed a book. This book, in fact. Like literally this exact one was the one I got. Jewish Dimensions of Social Justice, Tough Moral Choices for Our Time, by two authors who I had heard of at the time, Al Vorspan and Rabbi David Saperstein. Not only was I thrilled to receive the gift of a book, maybe that was a hint I should have become a rabbi, because rabbis have a problem with collecting books, if you've been to any of our offices. But I was so thrilled to receive the gift of a book, but not just any book, a book written by two giants of Jewish social justice. As a 17-year-old, I read these pages excitedly. It was really fun looking through it today, seeing all the various passages that I've highlighted and that I highlighted when I was 17 years old, just seeing the things that spoke to me. But everything I read in here, the things that I highlighted, served to reinforce and reinvigorate my incredible passion for our movement as a teenager. That I was part of a religious tradition that insisted that we participate in the creation of a more just society. It's not something we wait for God to do. This week, when I heard of the passing of one of the authors of this book, Al Vorspan, I immediately grabbed this book off my shelf. A book that, again, has been with me through every move I've made across the globe for nearly 20 years. And so, Al Vorspan was on my mind when studying this week's Torah portion, Ki Tisa, which in addition to the section of Vishamru that we sang tonight, also contains one of the most well-known episodes in the entire Torah, that of the golden calf. Previously, when I've studied this portion, I've taken the position of being an Israelite apologist, which I often do. To review, Moses has been on top of Mount Sinai, communing with God for quite a while. The people stationed at the foot of the mountain are growing impatient due to his absence, a lack of leadership, this vacuum. They get nervous and they get insecure and they begin to wonder what happened to Moses. Will he be returning? Does God even care about us? Without Moses there to guide them, they decide to take things into their own hands, demanding that Aaron, the now sole authority figure left with the people, to make them a god who will go before them. Aaron, not really thinking about the consequences of agreeing to this, decides, fine, that's great, I can create you a god, that's perfect. And Aaron begins to collect gold from the people, melt it, and take other necessary steps to build this golden calf. The sin of the golden calf is often viewed as the Israelites losing faith in God, in the God that freed them from slavery in Egypt, as well as Aaron's failure to lead them in Moses' absence. However, like I said, I've generally been an Israelite apologist and have taken the stance of 15th century philosopher and biblical commentator Isaac Abravanel, who asks, what did God expect these poor people? They had just been freed from slavery. They hadn't made any decisions on their own. They're left alone without a leader. They came from a land where idol worship was just the way it was done. So this commentator asked God, why would you become angry when the people fall back on their old practices? This is habit to them, second nature, and if there's no one there to lead them, this is what's going to happen. And we can understand this argument and thinking they just didn't know any better. How often do we say that about anyone or any situation we might encounter? They just didn't know better. Even modern Bible scholar Nahum Sarna takes the defense of the Israelites one step further and challenges us to reconsider their intentions. And again, I used to love this explanation. He says that although their behavior appears to us might appear to us as regression, he actually says it's progression. He argues that the building of the calf is actually a moment of progress for the Israelites. In other ancient Near Eastern cultures at the time, it was common practice to depict God standing on top of animals, usually bulls or lions. So while they were borrowing an image from another culture using a calf, the fact that they did not physically depict Adonai means that they acknowledged that their God was different. Their God could not be shown in any image, proof that they actually remembered part of God's law from the one time they'd heard the Ten Commandments up until now. Therefore, Sarna's arguing that they weren't building a God, rather they were constructing a throne on which God's presence would dwell, God's presence which they knew they couldn't depict in any form. They weren't rejecting their relationship with God, he argues, but they were trying to bring God closer to them. And like I said, that is a commentary that has made a lot more sense to me. It is something that made me have a lot of sympathy for the Israelites. But in this week, when I was rereading the Torah portion, I found these explanations no longer resonated. And it was through reading the many obituaries and articles and eulogies honoring the life of Al Vorspan that I stopped making excuses for the Israelites' behavior, and I went back to being angry at them, wishing I could shout through the text and beg them to stop. The Israelites' sin was not that they wanted to create something to physically represent God's presence among them. After all, they would soon do just that with the creation of the tabernacle. That is the purpose of the tabernacle, to represent God's presence among the people. Instead, I think that their sin, and the thing that is making me so angry, is that their sin was giving into despair and failing to hold on to hope in a time of doubt. As Rabbi David Stern shared in his eulogy for his beloved mentor and friend Al Vorspan, he said, classic Vorspan was admitting that fighting for justice is a struggle. It's never going to be easy or clear. But then Al would always soar into hope and inspiration, and that's what would win the day for him. He never chose despair. He saw the injustices in our country, understood Reform Judaism's moral imperative to act in our world, and created avenues for the entire movement to live out these values. Whether it was in 1963 when he was arrested in St. Augustine with a group of rabbis, or in the creation of the Religious Action Center or the Commission on Social Action, all of which help our movement pursue social justice. But in the avenues he created for our movement to live out our values, he reminded us that this is our task as Jews. As they wrote in this book, we still bear our historic Jewish burden to face the world and its pain head on, to engage in endless study and moral debate, to cherish human life and to pursue justice, to enhance the life of the mind and to struggle to be God's partner in repairing this broken and incomplete world. Hope is a prerequisite of living a Jewish life. It is the fuel that enables us to act within the world. The Israelites at this time in their journey chose to disengage from what the future could hold. They chose fear. They chose despair. They let go of hope. And I think that is why the golden calf episode appears in this Torah portion. This Torah portion called Ki Tisa comes from the opening words, Ki Tisa et harosh, lift up your head. The Israelites not only accepted the status quo, they enshrined it. They refused to lift up their heads and see possibility, a world in which justice prevails. Ki Tisa, lift up your head, is our reminder, a command to us to lift our heads, to see what is happening around us, to hold on to hope and take forward steps in addressing what we see. If you are a person that holds on to hope, that wants to not make the same mistakes of the Israelites, and you would like to join in the work that's happening here at Temple Israel, we have an opportunity for you on Sunday, March 3rd at 10:30 a.m. here in this chapel, where the team of Memphis International Coalition for Action and Hope, MICA, not to be confused with Micah Greenstein, but our organization, our Temple Israel leaders, will be leading a briefing session on that day to talk about how you can get involved. Let us lift up the legacy of Al Vorspan. Ki Tisa et harosh, lift up your head, because we've got work to do. Shabbat shalom.